La'el Collins was supposed to be a first-round pick in the 2015 NFL Draft. He had just finished 4 very successful seasons at LSU, and then the unthinkable happened. Here's the crazy story of why La'el Collins, the once projected first-round prospect, went undrafted. They say timing is everything, and that can absolutely be true, especially in this case. But before we get into all of that, let's dive into Collins' career as a football player and why he was coveted as a first-round pick. Collins was a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and attended Redemptorist High School, where he was named to Louisiana's All-State team for football in his final 3 years. He even played with a future NFL running back in Jeremy Hill, who we go on to play with at the collegiate level as well. After high school, he was regarded as a 5-star prospect by most sites and scouts and had offers to just about every big-name school in the country. In September of 2009, he committed to LSU, which was literally a 5 to 10 minute drive from his house, so it made a ton of sense. Collins accomplished a ton in his career at LSU and looked to be one of the best offensive line prospects in the country. As a freshman, he didn't have any starts but played in 7 games and was recognized by CBS Sports, who named Collins to the freshman All-American team. In his sophomore season, he started in every game and led LSU in total snaps that season. After playing left guard majority of the time, Collins was moved to left tackle to start his junior season. He adjusted quickly, winning SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week in his first game as a left tackle at the collegiate level. LSU's offense had a tremendous season in 2013, breaking a bunch of school records at the time. Collins could have gone to the NFL draft after his 3rd season, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best move due to the unforeseen events to follow the next year. He probably could have been a 2nd or 3rd round pick by leaving after 3 years and joining some other LSU teammates that left early like Odell Beckham, Jeremy Hill, and Trey Turner, but Collins returned for his senior season mainly because of his mother. His mom, Layetta Collins, was once 30 credit hours away from a degree, but a car accident and family responsibilities forced her to step away just short of her graduating. She went on to say, "I left college as a senior and I promised it would never happen to my children." After his senior season, La'el says he never regretted taking her advice and going back for a 4th season, and he accomplished even more by staying. He started all 13 games, led the team in snaps once again, won the Jacobs Blocking Trophy, which is awarded to the best offensive lineman in the SEC, was named 1st team All-SEC and 2nd team All-American in his senior year. He accomplished a ton as a senior and bumped up his draft stock from a 2nd or 3rd round pick to a late 1st or early 2nd round pick. The Senior Bowl went well and everything looked really good for Collins, and then unfortunate events followed. After his Senior Bowl performance, some thought it was a lock that Collins would be a 1st round pick, but somehow he ended up as an undrafted free agent. A great collegiate career, no character issues, no off-field issues. What would cause a 1st round pick to go undrafted, you may ask? Well, on April 24th around 10:30 p.m., a woman by the name of Brittany Mills was shot and killed at her doorstep in Baton Rouge. Mills was unfortunately pregnant at the time of her death and once dated the NFL prospect La'el Collins. I mentioned before how timing is everything, because if this happened a week later, Collins already would have been on an NFL roster and most likely a 1st round pick. There was no quote-unquote evidence to suggest that Collins was the man who murdered her, but Mills' daughter mentioned La'el Collins' name in an interview with the police. Due to that, Collins was brought in for questioning with the Baton Rouge police. Collins agreed to take a paternity test to see if he was the father, but those results would not come back until a week after the draft. On Wednesday, April 29th, a day before the draft, Collins flew into Chicago where the draft was being held, with hopes of shaking the commissioner's hand and being a 1st round pick. At this time, neither he or his family believed that the murder of Brittany Mills was going to derail those plans. After meeting with his 3 agents, Collins was told that the best thing for him was flying back to Baton Rouge and accelerating the process with the police. So while he had to sacrifice a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of walking across the stage on national TV and shaking the commissioner's hand, he at least tried speeding up the process and proving he was innocent and not endangering his draft stock. Collins was devastated and even in tears and begged the agents not to interrupt the experience for him and his family, but this is something that pretty much had to be done. At this point, every NFL team was aware of the homicide and Collins' name being involved, and to make matters worse, his offer to meet with detectives on Thursday was declined. This meant it was pretty much a guarantee that this situation would spill over into the draft and would destroy his draft value. On April 30th, the day of round 1 of the draft, he passed a lie detector test, but Collins' camp and police then tried to negotiate a meeting time, but Friday was not an option because Collins' lawyer had to attend a case in New Orleans. The police were not available on the weekend and had to settle for Monday. The problem was that the draft would be over by Monday, and at that point, Collins was surrendering thousands of dollars as each pick went off the board. They tried to enroll Collins into the supplemental draft over the summer, but that was not an option based on the 2011 NFL CBA. Apparently, there was a team that wanted Collins in round 5, but Collins' agents played out the scenarios and believed that going late in the draft was the worst thing for him financially. Some of you may know that undrafted players are signed to 3-year contracts as compared to 5th-round players that are locked into 4-year contracts. Collins' agents offered teams an ultimatum and said either draft him in rounds 2 or 3 or don't draft him at all. Those teams could have called their bluff, but to draft a player and potentially have him sit out a year and not sign is another possibility as well. It was hard at first for Collins to accept that his agents were basically not trying to get him drafted, but after going over the numbers, he eventually agreed it was the best way to go. Basically, his agents told teams if you draft him, he's going into next year's draft. And that was enough to scare off teams apparently because they didn't want the chance of wasting a pick on a player that may not sign with them. And it did come out later in a story that his agents were in fact bluffing, so if a team did in fact take him in the later rounds, they may have gotten a very big discount on a really good prospect. His agent received a text in the final 10 picks of the draft saying they were going to take Collins, but after his agent replied to the text saying, "You're going to embarrass yourself," they passed as well. Collins was officially an undrafted free agent. After being an undrafted free agent, there were 29 teams in on Collins and monitoring his situation. It was reported that Bills head coach at the time, Rex Ryan, flew into Baton Rouge to meet with Collins for dinner. The good news to come out of this is that Collins now has a choice of picking where he wants to play. When you are drafted, that's pretty much it. Unless you're willing to waste an entire year and sit out, you pretty much have to play where you were drafted. Collins started narrowing down his list and stated that he wants to play close to home and wants to play away from the cold. And right around that time, he booked a trip to Dallas. It came out the next morning that Collins was not the father of the deceased child, and all of a sudden the situation was starting to work itself out. Collins did say that if Dallas did not feel right, his contingency plan was to go to Miami. On Wednesday, May 6, Collins had a great meeting with Jerry Jones in Dallas and being accompanied by one of his agents and his mother. He decided to sleep on it and the next day signed a 3-year deal worth a fully guaranteed $1.7 million, which is big because it's not often that undrafted free agents get fully guaranteed contracts. On the downside, Collins lost about $15 million due to this situation, but if he played well enough, he'd have a chance to make that money back in the future. Collins started 11 games as a rookie and actually played very well as a 22-year-old undrafted free agent. In 2016, he did not play too much, but in 2017, he played over 1,000 snaps, mostly at right tackle, and played very well once again. He joined an offensive line that was already top end of the league, but Collins made it even better. After his 3-year deal was up, Collins got a nice payday with a 2-year, $15.4 million contract with $9.5 million guaranteed. In 2018, Collins played in all 16 games and looked very good once again, playing over 1,200 snaps at right tackle and earning a PFF grade of 71.9. Right before the 2019 season, it was announced that Collins signed another extension, this time for 5 years and $50 million with $35 million in total guarantees. For someone that was basically cheated out of millions of dollars just 5 years prior, it was great to see him sign a massive extension where he was now set for life. Collins had his best year in 2019, playing in 15 games and a career-high 86.4 PFF grade. In 2020, Collins missed the entire season with a hip injury. He was hoping to make it back at some point, but on October 4th, 2020, it was announced that he would miss the rest of the regular season. Collins is still on a big contract and should remain in Dallas for a while as long as he's healthy. He's still just 27 years old and hopefully has a healthy career going forward. A draft scenario like this is very rare, and from everything I've seen, Collins genuinely seems like a nice guy. From going back to college his senior year when he could have easily been drafted just to make his mom happy, to buying his mom a house recently and doing charity work as well, he just seemed like a good guy based on the research I've done. There was nothing he could have done to avoid all the trouble on draft night of 2015, but if you ask him now, he probably would not trade it for anything. But just imagine being in his shoes a week prior to the draft. He worked all his life, hours and hours of training and practice and hard work. He's supposed to be a first-round pick. The guy does nothing wrong, and then something out of his control makes him an undrafted free agent. It had to be a very, very hard 2 weeks for him, and honestly even beyond that, because it wasn't guaranteed for him to make a lot of money. Luckily for him, he played very well so far in his NFL career and has made a lot of money, but just imagine if he got seriously injured or just never played well and never made that money back. This would turn into one of the saddest draft stories of all time, but now at least we can look back on it and reflect and say, hey, it was very, very rough for a while for him, but at least now, 5 years later, we look back on it and say, hey, maybe God had a plan for La'el Collins the entire time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you did for more NFL content, and I'll talk to you guys next time.